First of all, welcome to this kind of this customer experience strategy masterclass, or how I've described it, how to develop and deliver an amazing customer experience in an unpredictable world. My name is Adrian Swinscoe. Here's a mugshot of me. I do say that I have a face for radio, or that's kind of how I like to describe myself. But I'm an advisor, a writer, a three-time writer of books on service. Here's a couple of them. One is kind of called How to Wow. The latest one is called Punchy. I don't have a copy of the very first one. Both of them are done, quite well. I do a lot of writing and research on the topic of service and experience, and do a lot of advisory kind of work on that. I also kind of run a podcast. I'm a Forbes contributor, and so on and so forth. So I've been in this field. I've been developing things that are trying to do well by our customers and employees for basically over the course of my whole career. But I've been specifically look. Sorry, I've got somebody who's Malky, somebody's trying to get into the session. Can you let them in, please? So I've been trying to be involved in the servicing and the experience industry for the last 25 years, but specifically in this sort of like advisory, writing and researching sort of space for the last kind of 12 years. But let's not focus on me. What I'd like to do is I'd like to talk to you about a number of different things over the course of the next kind of 90 minutes. I'd like to make that as interactive as kind of possible. And I'll sort of break up the different kind of like sections, and I'll see if anybody has any questions that you can either put in the chat, or we'll just we'll do an open mic session kind of later, a bit later on. So here's the agenda I want to talk to you about. There's a context. There's a big problem. I think there's a big problem with kind of CX, and it has a big Achilles heel. There's some big questions we need to be asking ourselves if we want to be successful. I have a very kind of simple idea around about what the solution should be. I want to share some examples that point to that, and then discuss with you some recommended next steps, and then we'll kind of wrap that all up. If you bear with me 1 second, I seem to have kind of a notice of people that are in the waiting room that I'm having to admit. Malky, can you take care of the people that are in the waiting room, please?
Yes, I can. Don't worry about it.
So anyway, moving on. And can everybody have their microphones on mute while I'm talking, please? Because it's just kind of easier kind of that way. Thank you. Come here. Whoever's not on mute, can I ask you to put yourself on mute, please? Najla and Medhat, neither of you are on mute. Can I ask you to put yourself on mute, please? Thank you. Anyway, let's crack on. Anyway, so here's what I want to kind of talk to you about first. First of all, I want to talk to you about a little bit kind of about context, about where we were, and particularly start before all of this kind of pandemic, particularly around the kind of the ROI. The thing I kind of like saw was that there's a huge amount of talk about customer experience in the around the world, globally. A lot of activity, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of investment, a lot of activity. However, the problem is that we've been seeing is that research shows us that about 70%, if not more than 70%, of all experience-related initiatives were failing to deliver on their expectations, and that's kind of like that's a real problem. I also think that we've actually seen that customer experience is actually becoming in danger of being kind of really overly complicated and very technical benchmark framework, and we're becoming almost obsessed with ourselves rather than actually the outcomes that we're kind of creating. Now that's kind of the other kind of bigger problem that rose up in the latter part of kind of 2019 and into 2020 is we started to see a massive kind of challenge to CX kind of projects around, to get for them to improve their ROI. Now, I think in many organizations, that can also kind of mean, or can be corporate speak for, we don't understand that, we don't believe in it, how can we get rid of it, or how can we stop it, how can we kill it? Because here's the thing, that if we can't prove the business value of something, then we have to ask ourselves the question, why are we doing it? Now, if we fast forward to now, we're now 6 months into this global kind of pandemic, and things are changing super fast. We could not have kind of written the story behind what we've actually seen kind of happening. But the things that I've been kind of like seeing that's coming out of a lot of this is that we've seen that customers are really watching kind of brands to see how they're responding to this crisis. You're also seeing massive shifts in customer kind of like behavior, and we're actually still not sure about kind of how much of that will stick. So things are kind of changing kind of really fast, and we've got to keep an eye on what is kind of going on, and that's requiring us to be very agile, very adaptable, but also to listen intently to the market and our customers and what's actually kind of going on. Now, the bottom line is we need to actually kind of like give our customers what they want and not what we think that they need. And that requires us to get closer to our customers and to really kind of lean in and do the things that matter for them. And it's really kind of meant that service and experience initiatives I've seen over the last kind of 6 months have become really, really pragmatic in their focus. But what I've done over my research and my work over the last kind of like few months and a few years is I've distilled some of these things down from what I see as leaders in their fields are doing, and what they need to do to succeed. The first thing is that leaders in their field, I believe, they understand the answer to this question. What is your experience kind of strategy? Now, you might think this is a simple question, but actually when I've asked many different executives from different parts of the world to actually tell me kind of what is your experience strategy and what makes that kind of helps, how do you use that to help you stand out? Many people can't really articulate it. And when I build on that, when I ask them then to say, well, actually, what is your experience strategy and how does it support the achievement of your overall business objectives? I get a lot of blank faces. That's a real problem, because if we don't actually have a clear idea what our strategy is, and we don't understand kind of how it's completely linked and it supports the achievement of our overall business objectives, then all of what we're doing becomes unconnected. And actually, that's the reason, one of the major reasons why that we can't prove the ROI of some of these kind of projects that we put together. But here's the thing, the leaders that we see around the world, in my experience, they understand the answers to those questions. They know what their experience strategy is, they know why they're doing it, and they know how it delivers value to the business. The second thing that they do is they really get to know their customers. And that doesn't mean to say that they gather kind of more and more data on them. What it means is they actually they get under the skin of their customers. As the Polish-American general semantics scholar Alfred Korzybski kind of once said, he had a great saying where he said, the map is not the territory. One of the tricks or one of the challenges that I see is that people are relying on or using customer data and believing that is a completely an accurate and reliable interpretation or representation of their customers. But Alfred Korzybski kind of said, the map isn't the territory. And we know that. So we are not just our data. And the leaders in our field, they know that they need to go beyond the data. They need to spend time with their customers to really understand the customers, to get in under the skin of the customers if they really want to get to know them, to help them better understand what they need and what we can help them deliver, or what we can deliver to them rather. The other thing that we need to related to that kind of point around sort of data is that too many kind of companies I've seen that are being technology and then data kind of led rather than kind of the other way around, i.e. thinking about the experience that they want to deliver and then thinking about the data they're required to deliver that, and then asking themselves, well, what technology do we need to use to be able to facilitate all of that. Too many people are putting the cart before the horse, and doing things the wrong way around. We must lead with experience. Like I said in the first question, we have to understand what our experience strategy is. We have to understand where we're going and what we want to do if we want to, have real control of of the experience we're going to deliver. Because if we don't, we end up being data and tech led, and it's almost a bit like a dog being led by its tail rather than the other way around. Now, all of this is kind of fascinating, but what we need to also the fourth thing we need to understand is that we need to not forget about the basics, because the basics are important. The basics are what we build, are the foundations of the big house that we build. Interestingly enough, because we forget this, we get caught up in all sorts of new ideas like around data and technology and new and different initiatives, which are all very exciting and very, very interesting. However, sometimes doing the basics kind of brilliantly is sometimes mundane, and sometimes it takes discipline and real commitment. But it's really, really important. And I'll tell you kind of why it's really important. Because it's really important because in the minds of our customers, it's really important to them. Neuroscience and psychology tells us that our avoidance, the human brain values the avoidance of risk and uncertainty and disappointment and failure somewhere between 5 and 17 times kind of more than the value that we place on joy, surprise, and delight. I think that's a massive there's a massive differences there. And the reason why those things, that difference exists is related to our primal instinct to survive. And we equate risk and disappointment and failure and uncertainty with as a threat to survival. That's just the way it works back in the the amygdala part of our brain. The problem is that many organizations don't do the basics brilliantly. They don't focus on the basics. They don't necessarily understand what the basics are for their customers and then ensure that they are brilliant at them, because that's the foundation that we build our future success on. But they also know that it's not about stopping. Sometimes actually what you've got to do is you've got to build that into a habit. Some people call this continuous improvement, but I think if you put a lens on it from a customer perspective, you have to look at it from their perspective and always what I call the grit. You always need to keep identifying and removing the sharp edges or the little bits of grit, the little pebbles in your customer's experience, the things that they find annoying and or irritating. I love this picture on this slide around this lady who is wrestling with an energy efficient light bulb. I've had that exactly the same experience. I've probably made the same face. One of the things I think about this experience, this idea, this picture particularly, is the idea that the only thing that we remember about that light bulb is the wrestle that we have to have to get into the light bulb, because the packaging is sealed so securely, and how you have to cut through the packaging, which means that you end up cutting through all the labeling and the explanation and everything else. And then that produces all sorts of sharp edges, which you can end up getting grazes or cuts on your hand, all for the sake of getting a light bulb out of a piece of packaging. It's a fascinating thing, but sometimes the smallest things, the little things that we don't think as significant, can actually loom large in our customer's mind, particularly if we take all sorts of small things and then keep removing them. They all can add up to a massive difference. But it's a behavior that we have to constantly be looking for these opportunities to improve, because that's what the leaders and the people that we hold as great in their fields, they constantly do. It's hard work, but they do it day in, day out, week in, week out, consistently, and that's what puts them in front of their fields. The next thing I want to say is that all of this sort of stuff, we live in a complex world, but actually we sometimes don't help ourselves by keep adding things to our experience, to our channel mix. and in doing so, we think we're helping our customers. But actually, in many ways, what we end up doing is we are adding complexity to both our lives and kind of their lives. Because research shows that by Siegel and Gale, in an agency in headquartered in New York, it's an international branding agency, and they've done a piece of research around simplicity and the value of simplicity. Now, since they've been doing that since 2009, they have a website called Simplicity Index, which is worth looking up, and they look at a portfolio of publicly traded brands that they believe that customers describe as being having simplicity at their heart. And they've found that 70% of customers are more likely to recommend a simple experience. And about 40% of them are more likely to pay more for a simple experience. But actually, a simple experience ends up being more engaging for employees as well. There's greater advocacy around it. And also, they outperform the stock market by somewhere in the region of about north of 300% over the last kind of like 10 years. So the point is that a simple experience pays, and we have to kind of, what the leaders in our field know that is that just because everybody else is adding channels doesn't mean to say that they will. If you ask yourself, if you think about it, some of the leaders, global leaders, like say the Amazons of this world or the Apples of this kind of world, and you ask yourself, how many different channels do they serve their customers over? And I would ask you to see if you can get beyond the number of fingers and thumbs, number of fingers that you have on one hand. That's in stark contrast to most organizations who have probably somewhere that serve their customers somewhere between 9 to 11 or 12 different kind of channels. Which means that you end up with an order of complexity, which is of like almost greater the difference between north of like 100%. That's that takes a lot to maintain. But the thing is, it's not just about not just about externally. Also, it's about internally as well. We are actually increasingly seeing that an employer experience, or the kind of the experience of the people at the agencies and the contractors and the workers that we use to deliver our experience, the experience that they have, we're seeing increasingly have a direct impact on the customer experience that we deliver. So we have to pay just as much attention to employee experience as we do to customer experience, and the leaders in their field, they actually get that. The next thing is that number 8 is about loyalty. And what also the leaders in their fields kind of know is that loyalty isn't about a loyalty program. Loyalty is delivered in 2 places. Research supports this. Around about 50% of all loyalty is gained around the point of purchase and how you make the buyer feel at that point of purchase. Do you make them feel right? Do you make them feel good about the purchase? Do you make them feel like they found the right kind of thing? So that's about 50%. The next 40% is about how we respond and how we react to a problem when something goes wrong. And if you think about it from a psychological perspective, from a buyer's perspective, those things make absolute sense. Is that point of purchase, make me feel right, make me feel good about spending my money, but also kind of catch me when something goes wrong. 90% of our relationship is driven by those 2 things, not by a loyalty program, but by those two things. The leaders in our fields, they get this. They understand that loyalty isn't about a program. It is about how we deliver service and experience. But they also kind of get the clever thing that they do is they make sure that they have the right mix of technology and the human touch to facilitate all of that. They are there for their customers in ways that their customers are going to want them when they kind of want them, so that they get the service and the experience kind of that they want. But leaning forward, they're also proactive by nature. They know that they understand that that problems do happen, and that but they're also they also do lots of analytical work to actually understand where problems happen around different kind of customer life cycles, so they can try and preempt some of these problems. So they are proactive by nature, which is a big move on from traditionally where customer service is, which is traditionally reactive in nature. I.e., there's a problem and then we show up and try and solve it. The leaders in our field are the ones that are using both predictive and preemptive tactics and strategies to try and get in front of kind of problems so that they can show up and help kind of provide solutions to customers' problems before they've even shown up. The next thing they do is that when they kind of do things like that is they also kind of personalize things, because we know that customers, but the majority of customers, they want a personalized experience, but they realize this is not just about marketing. It's about the whole experience. It's about intelligent routing. It's about next best actions. It's about, like I said, proactive service. It's about making recommendations. It's about success. It's about treating people as human beings, not just as account numbers or as part of a wallet share. It's about making things very human, making things easy, making things relevant, making things efficient and consistent. You know, that's what we need to, you know, what they're looking for. That's what kind of personalization kind of like means to them. You know, that it's a holistic thing. And then the final thing that's really, really shown up throughout this period of the pandemic is that this type of leadership in this type of organization that is going to be operating on a almost like a hybrid, possibly fully remote, possibly part on-site and kind of remote hybrid model is going to require a different type of leadership and a different type of leader. Somebody that focuses on empowering their kind of people, but not doing it, but being able to do it at a distance by building relationships and trust and respect with those kind of people. Now that's going to prove a challenge to many leaders, but what we've seen in the data, particularly the data coming from places like Gallup, where actually employee engagement has been going up through this kind of period as people have been really, as employees and agents have been really responding very positively to the flexibility that they've been afforded by many of the moves to remote working. Interestingly, what Gallup has also found is that engagement amongst both leaders and kind of middle managers and frontline supervisors has been going down as they've been feeling the pressure or feeling sort of out of sorts in this new operating environment. So I guess my kind of challenge kind of would be is that, you know, I know that these things have been changing fast, and we're asking our leaders to support our people, to look after our people, to be able to deliver the service and experience that we want to deliver to our customers. But we also kind of need to ask ourselves, how are we supporting the people that are looking after our frontline people? i.e., how are we supporting our leadership, and how are we helping them transition into a new frame or a new way of working? So those are kind of 12 quick things I believe that leaders are doing, that I believe that that if we want to be the best in our fields and if we want to lead our fields, these are some of the things we need to do. So this is kind of a bit of a checklist, but that's all kind of fine. But let's drill down onto some of the big questions that I was kind of I was mentioning kind of before. Well, let me stop there and ask if there's any kind of, if anybody's got any kind of questions that that they want to ask, and then we can before we kind of move on. Let me see if there's anybody that's put anything in the chat. Simple as elegant. Anybody got any questions? Just kind of speak up, or we'll kind of move on. I must have stunned you all into silence. Irfan says pretty clear so far. That's cool. I'm not going too fast. We all good? I'll keep going then. Fantastic. Awesome. Right. So let me go back into, here we go. So if I then share my screen again. So here's where we're at. So the next thing I wanted to discuss with you is the big questions I think that we need to ask. Now, I've alluded to some of these questions can be before, right at the top of the big 12, but I want to dig into them now, because these are some of the big questions I believe that we need to ask ourselves if we're going to build an experience that is going to wow and engage our customers. And the first one, and I want to reiterate it, is we have to be able to answer the question, what is your experience strategy? Like I said before, we have to be able to answer that, and then also answer the question, and how does it support the achievement of your business objectives? And you might kind of be asking yourself, oh, well, you said that before, and that's great, and that's true. I've also said this one before. What is the human touch and tech balance of your experience strategy? So those are the different kind of layers. Now, because this is where we kind of then dig into it, is because we need to go further. When we talk about what is the human touch and the tech balance, I actually think we need to start asking ourselves some questions. Is it high tech and high touch? Is it high touch and low tech? Is it high tech and low touch? Is it low tech and low touch? Because that's going to dig into it. We have to kind of make sure we're delivering the right thing, for our business and also for our customers. For example, we know, look at the kind of pictures on this, if we look at the pictures on this screen, we know that there's a market for handcrafted shoes and clothes and, suits and things. We know there's a market for that, and that's particularly kind of right. Now, so everything doesn't need to be kind of like low touch and kind of high tech, like this automated grocery robocart thing that's getting trialed out in California right now. It doesn't need to be all self-service and low tech like this kind of market kind of over here, but it could be if that's right for your customers. It could be more sophisticated. This is John in the top right, which is John Legere from T-Mobile in the States, who took a very high touch, high tech approach to their service because he thought their service in telecoms was broken and that we had to reinvent it. So rather than actually going from big call centers, what they ended up doing is they ended up creating highly equipped, highly trained local kind of teams to serve customers, near to where they are. So they ended up building almost teams of experts this is the strategy in cities around the US to be able to serve all the different customers. So if you were, say, a customer in Minneapolis and you called for service at T-Mobile, you would likely get routed to somebody who was working in the Minneapolis office, and they could give you both very local intelligence and information around what the state of the network, what the problems are at that, very kind of like close and very relevant to you. But also what they found is that people kind of really responded to the idea that you can connect with different people. You can either phone them or you can go into a store and you can get that, you combine that, the different types of service. Now, the problem is with all of that is that many of us take a very static view of that. We don't understand, we don't necessarily kind of characterize kind of what our experience is and also where it is now and where you would like it to be, and also kind of why, because then that allows us to define the direction of travel relative to our strategy and how it matches against our and helps and enables the achievement of our corporate objectives. We understand what the human and tech balance is. We understand kind of what the nature of our experience. We understand like how we want to evolve it and why. And then to add more complication to that, we're also going to have to ask ourselves, is it going to change for different types of customers, or is it like one size fits all? And does it change depending on the nature of the stage of the kind of journey? Now, here's just all of the kind of questions put on the one slide. What I found in my experience is that most brands haven't really answered these kind of questions. And so we end up just doing kind of like, they end up doing things and wanting to be a leader or be, to try and achieve leadership status in their kind of field. But they haven't got the level of kind of clarity. They haven't done the level of work that it takes to understand all these different things. So therefore they find it really quite, they get very, 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 very frustrated when they're not necessarily getting the results that they want. And go back to the stat right at the beginning of my presentation, which said that 70% of all experience initiatives aren't delivering on their objectives. And I would suggest that a lot of that is, it comes about because they haven't understood the answers to many of these kind of questions. So here's what I think the solution is. And I think it's, a lot of it's related around to ROI. And I think we can actually and how we can improve return on investment. Because I think that what we need to do is we need to tie everything back. When we think about our experience strategy and how to support the achievement of our business objectives, we need to tie everything back to the business. Now, you take a very, very simplistic kind of view of things, but I believe that most businesses, in simple terms, are driven off a number of different axes, and actually they have the same sort of chassis. That's why there's a kind of an old car chassis or Jeep chassis here. And I believe that most businesses, if you think about it, there's a customer demand or a customer interest bit where somebody shows interest in your business. There's there's how we convert that interest into kind of customers. Then there's how much on average our customer spends with us, how many times they spend, and that drives our overall revenue. And then we think about how much it costs us to do business, our cost to serve, and that drives our profitability. I actually think everything that we do when it comes to experience and driving that link to corporate objectives or business objectives, we need to be able to track back to the 5 things that are in black on that slide, not the things that are in red, because the things that are in red are outcomes. They're outcomes of everything else, i.e. the number of customers we have is an outcome of the amount of demand that we have and our ability to convert that demand into people that want to buy things from us. Similarly, revenue it cascades from that, and profitability cascades from that kind of too. So I actually think one of the things that we need to do is think about what is it we're doing in our experience kind of strategy, what is our experience strategy and how does it connect? But how does it connect in fine detail to level of customer interest, conversion rate, how much somebody can spend with us, how often they spend with us, and how and our ability to serve them, and our cost to serve. Now, I am going to pause kind of there. How is that so far? Anybody got any questions? Oops. No? No? Any questions? I can't seem to... Okay. Are we doing? Okay, everybody seems to be fine so far, so we're just going to move on. I'm having problems with this. So, so here's these are some, I guess, interactive examples, but actually what I wanted to share with you, just some examples of firms that I've kind of seen and some stories that I think will illustrate what I mean by tying them back to those kind of business chassis, kind kind of that idea, and how that can take an experience strategy and then map it onto the business strategy, which will drive business outcomes, and also then therefore drive kind of ROI. Now, the first example comes from Westpac. Now, Westpac is an Australian bank, and kind of what's special about them is that they did a whole bunch of big data analytics work. But the thing that they kind of did is that they looked at customer behavior across a life cycle of products. What they found was like a bunch of patterns that where customers would, when they became customers of the bank, that they would normally start with one product and then it would migrate to a second product and then almost naturally migrate to a third product. And that was sort of the life cycle, the normal life cycle of this particular type of customer. But what they also kind of found that there was a significant group of customers that hadn't, what's the word? They'd gone down the journey that they'd taken product one and then migrated to product two, but they hadn't quite made it to product three. And they believed through their analysis that there was like a 90% chance that they would adopt the third product when the time was right. Right. So what they ended up doing is that they, rather than actually just kind of deciding that they were going to drive a kind of a marketing campaign to these particular group of customers, what they said is they believed that when they enabled their clerks or there's tellers that were in branch, that when somebody came in to when one of these particular customers came in to do something on their account and they had to speak to a teller, that a message would pop up on a teller's screen and say, "Oh, welcome, Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith. We see that you've got product A and product B, and that's brilliant. But we also can know from our work, from our intelligence in the analytic work that we do in the bank, that people like you also see value in this kind of other product kind of too." And those tellers were able, in doing that, were able to achieve a 40+% conversion rate on making that offer of the third account to all these new kind of customers. I think that's kind of brilliant. But I think if you're going to tie that that example back to the chassis, I would say that is a clear piece of work, a clear project, a clear kind of workflow that you would tie back to in driving the number of transactions that you can have on that sort of chassis. Now, I think that's a really good example of how somebody is being very clear about, we want to do this, and here's why. So it's tied to our experience strategy, but it's also tied to our corporate objectives. And it's very, very focused on a particular area, and it will be very, very easy to prove the ROI of that. And therefore you get the support that you need around the bank. Does that make sense? Any comments on that? No. Well, somebody wants to speak up, then fine. If not, then I'll keep going. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So that's kind of like one example. The next example, it speaks to a different kind of like one of the different parts of the chassis. And this is an example from the UK, and it's about Biden, which is an online clothes retailer, and it's also kind of an example around personalization. Because what they did is that they found that they were trying to create a more personalized experience for their customers. And they were gathering all sorts of data. But what they were also kind of finding is that they were not using about 90% of the data. And they thought, well, actually, we're just getting no value from this. So there has to be a different and better way. So what they did is they started doing some research, and they came up with they came across a company called Jebbit. And Jebbit had a very different approach to personalization. They take what's called a declared data approach. It's very mobile first, but it's a declared data approach, because they believe rather than having 99 data points for one customer to be able to create a personalized experience, they believe that you actually only need between 3 or 4 really good quality data points if you to improve the experience that you deliver to your customers. Problem is like, this is not data that's inferred, or it's not that it's not necessarily data that's kind of been gathered from other kind of places. What they do is they build their approach on asking the customer to define the experience that they want. So they ask some very key, three or four very key questions. And in doing that, in focusing on and being more, trying to take that approach to make their experience more personalized, what they've actually been able to do is to drive an increase in their cart size, particularly in their online shopping, by about 34%. But it's also led to a bit of 50 to 52% kind of increase in their conversion rate. So for me, I think that example, that is all about higher average spend and higher conversion rate. Again, it tracks back to the chassis, but it's also kind of combines in that idea about personalization and how to get personalization kind of like right. So there's clear value in doing those kind of things. They want to create a personalized experience. That's part of their strategy, but there's clear, you can very, very clearly map what they're doing back to business kind of outcomes and business results, and therefore being able to improve the ROI. So I think that's another kind of great example, which then we can track back to that kind of business kind of chassis and business kind of outcomes. I'm just going to keep going, because I think I'm assuming that this is all kind of on track. The next example I want to share with you is another one from well, not another one. Is a very different one. This is a B2B company called Wolseley. They also kind of have a parallel brand called the Plum Center, which you can see in the background. Now, the interesting thing about these folks is that what they did is, like what we talked about before, and the kind of the 12 different things, is they know that the employee experience is just enabling the employee experience is just as important as trying to enable and facilitate improvements in the customer experience. And what they could have done is they know that they're symbiotically linked. What they found, actually, Wolseley and the Plum Center, they are the UK's leading distributor of plumbing and building materials and products. And so I remember speaking to Alison Goodwin, who is a customer support manager across at Wolseley, and she was telling me how they had a strategy which was about making it easy for their customers to do business with. It was as simple as that. Everything was driven from that perspective. And so what they ended up doing is they said, well, actually, how can we do that from our perspective? And they said, well, our ability to respond to that is facilitated by the knowledge, the knowledge that our agents have and the tools that we equip them with. And because they believe that knowledge underpins service. I mean, here's so here's what they did, is they put a lot of investment into developing a very intelligent, smart internal knowledge base, where staff were encouraged and incentivized to contribute to these increasing kind of questions that the customers kind of ask. Now, if you think about plumbing and building supplies, then you can realize that when you get into the plumbing and building, then the number of parts and different sort of variations of different things can explode. And so actually they started off very small, and then it grew and grew and grew. Now that the responses to questions are growing at somewhere in the region of an average of about 30 a day, and this is constantly getting updated and kind of being augmented. But here's the thing that kind of that what it's meant for them is that being able to develop that and giving people fast access to that has been able to help them improve their first call resolution. Has gone from 74% to 98% by building that knowledge base. Their customer satisfaction has gone from 80% to 96%, and their NPS score is now 82. And the average time to train a new agent has gone down from 12 weeks to 4 weeks. But also doing that, employee engagement has gone from 37% to 74% because people feel enabled and equipped and have access to the right sort of things. And they've reduced the number of service-related calls because of that, all of that, by about 25%. Now, the thing that strikes me about all of that is like some of those numbers are astounding, but actually kind of in many ways what that kind of means is because they've improved their first call resolution rate, their average time to train, their engagement's gone up, and therefore the turnover has kind of gone down, and the number of calls kind of coming in. What that's done, so it's related to their strategy, but how it kind of tracks through to their business objectives and that chassis is they have directly contributed to delivering a lower cost to serve. There's the ROI for you. And that's kind of, for me, is absolutely kind of clear. That's a real kind of internal kind of like thing. And the final example I wanted to share with you is this one, which is from another business to business one, but it's kind of about, not necessarily about internal enablement, but actually external enablement. And what Budget did in truck rental was that they invested very heavily in building self-service tools, whether that was an intelligent knowledge base, chatbots, all those different sort of things. And what they were finding is that they wanted to, there's a huge demand for self-service from their customers, because they were getting lots of simple and easily kind of like simple and repeatable kind of questions coming into their contact centers and their help desk kind of all the time. And what they did is build all these kind of like self-service tools so that people could get the answers that they're looking for kind of when they can need them, but then via digital means. What they ended up doing is they ended up being able to, they achieved a 28% reduction in inbound calls by doing all that, a 74% reduction in email inquiry volume, but on the flip side, which is a bonus they didn't expect, a 35% increase in online bookings. Now, what they've done on the front end is that by allowing their customers to self-serve and making things kind of easier, is they've delivered on their strategy, but again, if they've delivered on helping the kind of business achieve its overall objectives, and they've directly contributed to lowering directly contributed to delivering a lower cost to serve. So for me, all of those kind of like all of those examples are clearly lined up, i.e. they know what their experience strategy is, and they know how it directly contributes to the achievement of their corporate objectives or their business kind of like strategy. And I think that's the key linkage that many businesses kind of like miss out on. And that's the thing that I would kind of suggest, or I would encourage you to think about when you're thinking about developing your kind of strategy. It's all these different kind of questions that we need to be asking ourselves. We need to go deeper and build those kind of links, because here's the thing. It's like, we are going through a global kind of pandemic. It will have an economic impact on pretty much everybody. And in many countries will experience an economic kind of tightening of sorts, and therefore there'll be pressure on both our customers and also our businesses in terms of where we spend our money. And actually, the more that we do, the better work that we do in defining our strategy and showing how it links to the achievement of overall corporate business results, and that we can prove the ROI and have a clear line of sight to the ROI, the better chance we will have of delivering the things that we want to deliver. So here's the thing that I would like you to suggest you think about kind of doing, and this is what when it comes to strategy is, first of all, you have to ask yourself the big questions now. But if you're already in it, I would actually suggest that you do a number of different things. First of all, conduct an audit of where you currently are and ask yourself, do all of the initiatives that I have going on in my organization, do they fit? Do they meet these criteria? Can I directly prove that they deliver value to my business, that they contribute to business kind of results, that I can prove the ROI? And when you've done that audit, then you have to ask yourself some questions. How many of them have clear business and ROI benefits? And if they don't, do I prune them? And do I add other ones where there are clearer business benefits and better alignment with our with what our customers kind of want and our overall kind of strategy? And if we do that, and then we monitor the success of them, and then we can just continue to repeat that process. What we will do is we will absolutely ensure that the pursuit of excellence in customer experience and the belief that experience is an area where we can differentiate ourselves, then we will prove that. We will prove that to our businesses, and it will be there for the longest kind of terms. Because if we do not double down on proving the value of investing in experience, then it's in danger of becoming a nice to have. And in tight conditions, nice things to have tend to get jettisoned quite quickly. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have kind of today. Hopefully that has been of interest, of value, of it's made you kind of think. I mean, anybody got any questions? Anybody going to be brave enough to turn their mic on and ask me a question? Go on, please. No?
That was awesome. I don't think so. We have any questions.
Thank you. Welcome.
That's why we are quiet. As you said that, yes, you have stunned us into silence. So yeah, that's why we are quiet.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No? I'm getting some positive kind of positive kind of comments in the chat. So I mean, I know that might be a bit quicker. I always pride myself of never running over time. I mean, there was less kind of interactivity than I would have maybe kind of liked or expected, but the move to Zoom is the way that didn't necessarily help with that. But all I would say is that I hope that you find that interesting. Let me just kind of
hello.
Oh, hello.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So usually, what forms are you going to use to write the customer experience strategy? Is it the normal forms that you usually use in writing the strategies?
Is it Dr. Samir?
Yeah.
Dr. Samir, I mean, I guess I wouldn't necessarily be constrained by any forms, as it were. I actually think that sometimes forms or formats can sometimes limit kind of how we think about things. I think forms can help us frame our thinking, but actually I think maybe just approaching the questions as they are is a good place to start, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, makes sense.
I mean, because then you actually it's less about the kind of the form and more about what is the question, what does it mean for us, and then we actually then go through a bit of almost like an investigative, discursive kind of process.
Okay. What I mean, for example, can we consider the journey map is a way that we could format the strategy of the customer experience?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think there's I think you can come at this from different kind of places. Now, the journey map could be a way that it describes what you're trying to do, but it's not an end in of itself. I guess what I would do is almost ask yourself, well, ideally, what is our experience? What characterizes our experience right now? And then where would we like it to be and why?
Okay.
I mean, and then we can, because then we can start thinking about, well, does that fit with our business model and our business objectives and our corporate strategy and our brand and all these different sort of things? Because one approach isn't necessarily going to fit with another approach. One approach for one brand isn't necessarily going to be the right approach for another brand.
Got you. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi there, if allow me. Hi.
Yes. Hi. Hassan?
Yes. How are you, Adrian?
I'm very well, sir.
Thank you very much for the insight. I think it's really summarized a lot of things, and I think there is a key lesson here behind this, which is we need to balance between the business and the experience that want to be delivered. I believe this is the most important lesson here, that regardless of the technology or regardless of the touch or the complication, the simplicity, we need to first of all, we need to understand really what's the experience or strategy we want to bring here.
You're absolutely right, sir. Absolutely right.
So I have just a question, if you can elaborate more, that why the management, let's say the senior management, don't realize it's so simple that the CX are delivering the value, but still the CX bro still finding it difficult to the management to understand. Can you elaborate more here in our tactics that can help us? Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let me just stop this right now. So Ehsan, I think it's a great question. And I actually think that that one of the major kind of problems is that many professionals or many people that are very kind of devoted or massive advocates of better service and better experience. What we do is, like, if you remember right at the very beginning, I talked about how customer experience is in danger of becoming overly codified and certified and benchmarked and all these different sort of functionalized. What we end up doing is we end up talking a language that isn't necessarily the language of the boardroom or management, if that makes sense.
I agree with you, yes.
And therefore we need, as a discipline, as a domain, as an area, as a set of practitioners, a set of advocates in this space, what we need to do is we need to talk the language of the board and of management. And they are interested in, whatever the corporate strategy is, whatever the business strategy is, whether it's going to be, growth in customer numbers or profitability or whatever it might be, entry into new markets, that we have to tailor what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we explain what we're doing to management in ways that they understand.
So we need to speak the same language of the business, you mean? Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
There is no point kind of like having a domain that speaks its own language that nobody else understands.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ehsan. That's a great question. It's one of the continual perennial challenges.
Adrian, I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Are we too obsessed with ROI? Because you said it's quite obvious that the management speaks language of numbers.
Yes.
Looking at the interests of the business, are we not doing a disservice to the customer? How far can we go with only ROI-driven initiatives in CX?
So, Balakrishnan, I think that that's a fair kind of point, and I think that some people can go, if you don't work hard enough to develop this connection and the ROI, then there's a potential that we end up cutting or not doing initiatives that might just be the right thing to do. And I think so that's absolutely kind of like, right, I completely agree with that. But the ROI argument I think is one that is very real. And I think the experience and service domains need to get better at making making the arguments about why things kind of matter, and not because when challenged, and challenge will happen when there's strain on budgets, and market demand and so on and so forth, then only those things that can really and clearly prove their ROI are more likely to stay and to be supported and defended. And so I don't think we've gone too far on it. I sometimes just don't think there's a difference between people talking about it and people delivering it. I mean, I know that now what I've noticed is that I've heard from from other people is there's this massive difference between the rhetoric of caring about what customers want and what customers kind of need, and the idea of being customer centric and building a customer centric organization, and actually the reality of where actually organizations kind of are. What we've actually seen, I think, over the last kind of few months is a rapid decrease in that gap between rhetoric and actual real activity. And just because the conversation around ROI has been going on and has been kind of top of the agenda for the last kind of like 12 months and is still there, doesn't mean that just because we're talking about it doesn't mean to say it's actually happening. Because I think there's generally a time lag between when things get talked about and then when things actually kind of get put in place. So I think we still need to keep talking about it to drive through to behavior, to make sure that we start proving ourselves, because actually when we start proving ourselves and delivering in that ROI, then we allows ourselves, I feel like we start generating the organizational social capital that we will need to do other things which might be a bit more speculative or a bit more nice to have, or just the right thing to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, got it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.